I'm Robert Sumwalt, and I'm the chairman of the NTSB. And the National Transportation Safety Board investigators arrived in Columbia around 10:30 this morning to begin our investigation of the tragedy involving an Amtrak passenger train and a CSX freight train. We've brought in a full investigative go team. Now, the NTSB, we're an independent federal agency charged by Congress to investigate transportation accidents, to determine the probable cause, and then to issue safety recommendations to keep those accidents from happening again. Before I go any further, I would like to offer our sincere condolences to those who've been affected by this tragedy. I've got with us today Mr. Jim Southworth and Mr. Mike Hiller. They are part of the investigative team. They've got years and years of investigative experience. Dick Hibskin is leading the investigation. He's got over 30 years of rail experience, including over 20 years with the NTSB. He'll be with us tomorrow, but of course he's occupied today. Dick will be leading a multidisciplinary investigative team of experts. Our team will be looking at the operations of both trains. We'll be looking at the crew training and employment records. We'll be looking at company procedures. They'll be looking at they'll be examining the medical condition, or excuse me, the mechanical condition of each train. In addition, we'll be looking at the survival factors and the crashworthiness aspects of this collision. We have our chief medical officer here from Washington who will be looking at the medical factors, including making sure that the DOT required drug and alcohol testing is completed properly. That's standard for any commercial transportation accident. It's required. We'll be looking at the work rest periods of the crews of each train, as well as the cell phone records of the operators of each train, and that's standard for any transportation accident that we look at. We have a signal specialist that will be looking at the signals that govern train operations, those wayside signals, that red lights, green lights, yellow lights, whatever they happen to be. We'll be looking at the signal systems. Each of those signals have an event recorder that records data, so we can download and see what those signals were saying. We'll also be looking at the rail switches, and I'll talk about rail switches in just a moment. As far as recorders, there are really two types of recorders that we are interested in. There's the traditional black box, if you will, which is the event data recorder, and there are video recordings. Now, most train operators these days have at least forward-facing video cameras, so they can look out and see what is ahead of the train in case there's a grade crossing collision or something. So we have, and some operators on some of Amtrak trains, they even have inward-facing video cameras. The forward-facing video camera from the forward-facing video from the Amtrak train, that recorder has already been recovered, and it was shipped back to Washington on the same government jet that brought our GO team in here. So our team in Washington in our recorders lab is pouring through that and be looking at that tonight. And tomorrow, when we have a press briefing, a media briefing, I think we will be able to update you on what we're finding from that. Oftentimes it has the speed printed out, superimposed on the video. Now, the event data recorder in each train, in both the locomotive for the Amtrak and the CSX, frankly, we are still looking for those. In addition to our investigators, we have representatives from the NTSB's Office of Transportation Disaster Assistance. They will be working closely with the families of the victims. Now, we are just literally in the very beginning stages of this investigation, but here's some preliminary factual information that we have right now. The Amtrak train was operating on CSX track, owned by CSX and controlled by CSX. On the Amtrak train, we've confirmed with Amtrak that there were 7 passenger cars and 1 locomotive. And on the CSX train, there were 2 locomotives, both on the forward end, head end of the train, and 34 empty auto rack cars. And I'll explain that in just a moment, what they were doing there. Now, as far as people on board, Amtrak has confirmed that the Amtrak train had 9 crew members. That would include an engineer, conductors, and we're still going to get a final count on how many conductors. Oftentimes there's a conductor and then 1 or 2 assistant conductors, and then there were some service employees as well that might work in the club car. And there were 136 passengers. Now, let me explain this right here. The Amtrak train would be operating from north to south, and the working theory is that it was continue on the main track, that it was to continue on the main track through this switch and continue on like this. Now, before the Amtrak came in, the CSX train had been over here at a loading and unloading facilities for cars, automobiles, and they had unloaded cars, automobiles, and had come out through a siding here, and come up north, and then backed into the siding. So this is where the CSX train was located, somewhere in here. So the bottom line is the CSX train is parked in the siding. For whatever reason, the switch, and when I talk about a switch, I'm talking about a rail switch that can actually switch how the track goes from here to here. For whatever reason, that switch was, as they say in the railroad industry, lined and locked, which basically means it was aligned for the train coming down this way to be diverted into the siding. Of course, key to this investigation is learning why that switch was lined that way. Because the expectation, of course, is that the Amtrak would be cleared and would be operating straight down like this. Now, I've gone out with our team. First thing we did when we got here this morning was to go out and survey, and I say survey, I mean take a very careful look at the wreckage, and I can tell you there's catastrophic damage to each of the locomotives. In fact, I would say that the Amtrak locomotive would be not recognizable at all. Throughout the next few days, our investigators will work on scene to thoroughly document the accident site and to gather factual information. And our goal is to find out not only what happened, but why it happened, so that we can prevent it from happening again. While on scene, we will not be determining the probable cause. That's not why we are here right now. We will ultimately do that, but while on scene, we just want to collect what I call the perishable evidence, the information that goes away with the passage of time. So we've got to go and interview. We want to interview the crew of the CSX train. We want to interview them. We will interview dispatchers for CSX. We will interview everybody that we can to help us understand this accident sequence. Some of the information, memories change with the passage of time, so we want to get those interviews done now. Things like training records, we can do those in a week or two, but we want to get the information right now that will go away with the passage of time. And while we are here, we will not be speculating. We never speculate. We just want to deal with the facts. I imagine that our investigators will be here 5 to 7 days. And since we're just beginning our investigation, we don't have a lot of information to report to you.